Welcome to Reimagine and to the Joy of Cooking, the Science of Eating Well, which is the kickoff event for our three-part series, Food as Medicine. My name is Andrew Engel. I'm Senior Programmer at Reimagine. This month, we'll reimagine food as a prescription for well-being, for nourishment, for spiritual growth. Guests will share how transformations in diet, preparation, and food service can allow us and those who we love to experience wholeness and healing. Now, we all have our personal struggles with grief, trauma, and loss, and there are systemic issues to overcome: hunger, poverty, racism. Food is a pathway out of adversity and into abundance. As some of you may know, we at Reimagine have been leaning into the process and philosophy of post-traumatic growth. PTG is evidence-based psychological research that allows us to recognize opportunity and experience change when we're struggling with grief, loss, or trauma. The kinds of growth that can occur include an increase in personal strength, optimism, more meaningful relationships, a deeper appreciation of life, and heightened spirituality and purpose. And there are several pathways to experiencing these changes, such as telling your story, which is what our guests will do today. And perhaps some of you can share some of your stories in the chat. The concept of PTG isn't exclusive to Western science. For example, the late Zen Buddhist monk and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh has a simple expression that is another way of describing PTG: no mud, no lotus. Struggle is essential for any kind of growth. We've got a stellar lineup of chefs, nutritionists, dietitians, and medical providers who will share their expertise in culinary medicine, the art and science of helping people to access and eat healthy food. Our guests are Kaiulani Odom, Dr. Drew Ramsey, who I hope is here, and Angela Roberson. They're each going to say a few words about themselves, but I encourage you to read their complete bios in the event listing. I'll also be pasting that in the chat. And our special moderator for today is Rebecca Katz. Rebecca was also one of my thought partners for this series. And I'm grateful, Rebecca, for your leadership and your guidance in everything. Rebecca is a nationally recognized culinary translator, an expert on the role of food in supporting health and well-being, and a good friend of Reimagine. I'll let her share a bit about her discovery of the healing powers of food. Then we'll hear from the rest of our speakers. And finally, we're going to give all of you an opportunity to ask questions during Q&A. So Rebecca, I'm handing it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you everyone for coming today to talk about food and nourishment and what it really means to think about food as an avenue for growth, particularly during difficult times. And food as something that can nourish us in the deepest ways and connect us to ourselves and to our communities. And we just have so many wonderful people to talk about how food can really help in healing. I'm really excited. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about where I come from in this world of food as medicine and how I got there. And just a little bit of my philosophy, and then I am going to hand it over and ask some questions, and we'll explore this idea of food as nourishment. I grew up in a family that was very food centric. But somewhere along the way in my 30s, I had my own personal health crisis, and I lost that connection with food. And it really helped me re-examine my connection with food and health and myself. And my health crisis took me to a place of really post-traumatic growth, where I realized I had to make some big changes. And I found myself landing in Italy with no luggage and no language. So my bags were lost, and any Italian I knew flew out the window. And the only thing that connected me was food. And I had many characters come into my life during that time, including a cranky signora who threw a pot of my pasta out a 3-story window, and a wonderful chef who I met on a street corner, who reintroduced me to food and the farmer's market. And even though I didn't speak the language, helped me speak the language of food. I came back from that journey, which was a year long, and I ended up in culinary school at the age of 37. And I went to an amazing school that was focused on food and healing. It was called the Natural Gourmet Institute for Health and Culinary Arts. And I became really schooled and immersed in this idea that what we eat can really affect how our bodies feel, how we cook, with the intention of how we cook. And the most important thing I got was how we can nourish ourselves and others. Fast forward, I went through my culinary boot camp. I worked in a lot of different places, but where really my big awakening or aha moment came was when I was in Mendocino, California, which is Northern California, and from a nice East Coast girl, that's like Land's End. I was really out of my element. And I was working in a kitchen and running a kitchen, but I got a phone call that my father was dealing with throat cancer, and his treatments were really going to be rigorous for him, for a man who loved food, and food was the platform of his life. So I took time off and I went back to Maryland and I cooked for him. And at that point, there weren't any cookbooks at all, really, on how to cook for somebody who was going through cancer treatment at the time. So I really had to make it up on the fly. And all I knew was my father said, and don't feed me any of that hippie gruel stuff. Don't feed me healthy food. Don't try to like cram something healthy in. I know I'm going to sniff it out. And I thought to myself, well, I have to make this food as yummy and nourishing as I can. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I know that a Vitamix blender is going to play an important part, because he was going to have trouble swallowing. So I learned a lot. He was my first guinea pig, and he made it through, and he, survived and thrived. And during that part of his life. And then I went back to California, and I ended up at a place called Commonweal and their cancer help program, because their chef had left. She just was on sabbatical and they needed somebody to fill in. And I was that person. And that was the game changer for me, because I was in this kitchen and I was cooking 3 meals a day, and I was cooking for 10 people who had cancer, and they were in all different stages of their cancer treatment and wellness. And I, again, really didn't know what I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And I had to leave it at the front door. I had to just, anything I thought I knew about cooking in a restaurant or anything else, I had to be totally present. And I just said, look, I'm just going to meet everybody where they're at, and my goal is to nourish them. And honestly, that was the big game changer in my life. And that was in 2001. So I've been at this for quite some time. And what I saw happen during the 10 days of cooking for people with cancer was remarkable, because people were going through treatments and they were being told like that they could eat anything, even though they couldn't taste anything, or there just was a lot of misinformation about what they could have, what they couldn't have, all of those different things. So I just started playing with taste and flavor. And what I wanted to do was get people to feel connected to the yum of food. And so I have spent my career basically writing cookbooks and working in the area of food as medicine to help people connect their taste buds to yum, because the power of yum and that involuntary spasm of vocal delight is what really nourishes us. So we could be eating the most healthy things in the world, but if they don't taste good, we're not going to eat them. So I've spent time really understanding and helping people to understand and educate people that great taste and great nutrition doesn't sit at opposite sides of the table, that really we can nourish ourselves by doing the smallest things, but the food has to taste good. And I have gone on to train doctors in this area, and I went on to get my Master's of Science in Nutrition just so I could, again, translate, but it always come from behind the stove. And at the end of the day, a culinary translator just means you're hearing what's supposedly good for you or not good for you, but how do you make that work in your own life? So that's really what my mission has been over the past 22 or 23 years. How can I help people connect from behind the stove, or however, whatever that stove is? It might not even be a stove. So I want to just start asking questions now, because we've got some wonderful thought leaders in the room, and I'll be here to answer any questions that people might have. The first thing I am going to ask, the first person I want to talk to is Keulani. And I would love for you to talk about the relationship of food and ritual in your community, and how you use food to find connection to people in your community, and just a little bit about yourself and what you are doing, because it's so really remarkable.
I apologize. My dog's been quiet until now, and all of a sudden she's barking, so I apologize. But aloha, I'm Keulani. I'm from Hawaii, and I am an indigenous nutritionist. I started off wanting to be a professional hula dancer. I was traveling the world, and I was in Japan, and the next place I was going to go to Spain, and then I got pregnant. So I went back to school, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to go keep on my cultural path. And I think I took one basic nutrition class, and that was it. I was hooked. I was like, oh, I love this. I'm going to try and do both, but ended up going towards nutrition. And, in school, I didn't like science at all, but all of a sudden I found out that I love chemistry and I love microbiology, which was a total shock to me. And so I'm very happy for the Western training that I got, but the base of what I do lies in my cultural foundations. And that even as I was going through my schooling at the university, I was working at one point, I was working for WIC, and I was reading through their manual, and it says, oh, don't let moms chew their food and put it into their baby's mouth because they could contaminate. And I don't know how many of you have kids, but we have all chewed our food and put it into our baby's mouth. But we also have a saying in Hawaii, it's called kuika mana, and that we realize that the essence of the person also gets passed down to the baby with that food. It's not about germs. It's just not about germs. There's a whole nother level to food for that. And so I continued on, and I was working in the community, and I met Herbert Hope, excuse me, who happens to be my mentor, my friend. And he started teaching me all the cultural practices, how to lay net, how to make an imu, how to do all of prepare food in the cultural ways, and that has really been where my career has lied, is connecting the cultural to the learning and to the reclaiming our ancestral abundance. Is that if we can step back and to really look as a template to how we lived in Hawaii, then we can help in all of our programs if you can infuse that. The other thing that was really significant for me was understanding the spirituality of my food. You don't learn that in a Western university. It's proteins, carbohydrates, fats, that's what you learn. But what I understood, what I learned about the spirituality of my food is that my food connects me to who I am, connects me to my culture, connects me to my spirit, it connects me to the land, it connects me to the ocean, it connects me to all of these things. And when those connections get broken, that we become unhealthy. And how do we use food to embrace and to support these connections in a community? And as an Indigenous community, what I also was going through at the time was that we're taught to talk about how poor off we are, or how many people are in prison, how high our disease rates are, how much obesity we have. And I was hearing that year after year after year, and I knew that was unhealthy in itself, and I needed to stop telling that story. Unfortunately, it's still the story today when you have to, we rely on grants for most of our programming. And so it's like, who can tell the worst story? How bad off are you? And I didn't want to tell that story anymore, that my story needed to be about our community that was resilient, that had a lot of culture, that had a lot of connections and who they were. They were strong, they were still here, they were, and that needed to be the story that I was going to be telling, that I no longer was going to play the game of trying to outbeat someone in how sick we are just to get money for my programs. And I think that's really important. But again, like I said, the spirituality of food is that Hawaiians had, they were, I forget, what is the word when you have many gods. They had many gods. And so all of our food represented one of these godly forms. And so when you ate the foods, you got all of the things that you admired. And someone once said, well, that's, what a pagan thought. And I said, well, for those of you that go to church, what happens when you go to church on Sunday? Well, you eat that piece of bread and you're eating the body of Christ. and you drink the wine or water and you're drinking the blood of Christ. And then that becomes a very spiritual act in that food. Well, Indigenous people understand that spirituality 24/7, every day. We understand that the foods that we're eating connect us to our elements. Our spirituality is connected to our element. And so we have a much different relationship with our elements. In the Western mind, often you own things, right? You own the farm, you own the plants, you own the water. For us, we don't own those things. We have a relationship with them. And so we have a relationship with the food. We have the relationship with the ground or the aina that it's built on. And so we take care of it because we understand, when you think you can own things and do whatever you want with them, then you don't take care of them in the same way that you do if you have a spiritual relationship with them. And so that is the very foundation for all of the programs they do. I work at Kokua Kalihi Valley. We're a federally qualified health center, but we also have 100 acres in the back of the valley. A lot of it is vertical in the mountains, but in that space, we grow food and medicine. We have an apothecary for our indigenous medicines. We do lomi lomi, which is our cultural way of massage. We do reforestation. And basically, we also do health through land the connection to land. Down at the clinic where I work, we have a food cafe that we open just 2 days a week. We have a food hub. We work with up to 30 farmers, small organic farmers, to bring in their food so our community can have healthy food at a reasonable rate. I do a pregnancy program for Native Hawaiian couples. We do a family health program where we take kids from 3rd to 5th grade, and we do cooking with them every month. We teach them cultural practices on food. We get them out into the land, and we do a lot of community education. We just had our pregnancy class last night, and this was a class focused on food. And what I tell all of them is that you, as the woman, you carry all the eggs, and the men, they carry the sperm. And so when you have your child is going to have your grandchildren, and that grandchild is going to have your great grandchildren, and so on. And so as you nourish your sperm and the eggs inside of you, you are actually nourishing all of your future generations. And so when you eat something today, you're nourishing the eggs of this child that's going to be born, and they're going to bear again all of your generation. So you're not just eating for tomorrow or to lower your diabetes, or because your class reunion's coming up in 2 weeks and you need to lose 20 pounds. You are eating to set the foundation for all of your future generations. And not only that, everything that you say, they hear. They hear it to the deepest core of their cells, and everything you do, they understand what you're doing. And so when we're talking about how do we behave in this world, what do we bring to this world? And if we understand that everything we eat, that we do, and that we say is affecting all of our future generations, do we act differently when it's not just about tomorrow? And so that's just the basic for a lot of the work that I do, and I'm happy to be a part of this conversation. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you. That's just such an unbelievable perspective. It's a beautiful perspective. It just really speaks to looking at the big picture of how we can just be a part of something larger than ourselves, right? When it comes to nourishment. I want to ask Angela Robertson to talk about your experience. Angela, you're in my hometown of Baltimore, and you're doing some remarkable work in the Baltimore community. And what I would like to know from you is the relationship to food and community, and the work that you've been doing addressing systemic social trauma in that area, and some of the tactical ways that you are using your skills to help patients in a hospital and in the community trust and change their relationship with food. That's a tall order, Angela. Come
It
on.
really is. So first, let me say thank you to all of the guests who have joined today's talk. We really do appreciate it. My name is Angela Roberson. I am a clinical registered dietitian. As Rebecca said, I do work in Baltimore City. I work, am part of the MedStar healthcare system. And so I work at an outpatient clinic that is embedded within one of the MedStar hospitals in the heart of Baltimore City. And primarily my practice is, so it's an interesting program. The program that MedStar recently developed about going on 2 years now is a program called FoodRx. And this program was designed because there are certain patients that we refer to as frequent flyers, meaning every 30 days, every 2 weeks, they are back in the emergency room for a host of reasons. But there are a particular subset of those patients who are always in the hospital for the same reason. And so it caused them to ask themselves, why? What is the reason? What are we not doing? What are we missing that we cannot quite seem to bridge the gap with this patient and set them, once they're discharged, on the path to wellness and health? And so if you know anything about Baltimore, and if you know anything about the community in which the community which our hospital serves, it is primarily African American, tend to be low income, sometimes under the federal poverty line, often on some level of Social Security disability, many multi-generational households. And so we decided to take, instead of a completely clinical approach to treating our patients, we decided to take a whole person approach. And we developed the concept from a program that started in Pennsylvania, in the very rural parts of Pennsylvania, where diabetes rates were going through the roof and healthcare was hard to access. When it comes to what we call these chronic diseases that have a lifestyle component, diseases like diabetes or heart disease, COPD, which can also be environmental, right? You get exacerbation. Is it black mold? Is it lead paint? Or, is it some sort of irritant in the air? Maybe it's your neighborhood. We know that sometimes just going a zip code or two over can change your lifespan, can increase your lifespan by, 10 to 15 years, right? So we know that sometimes your zip code determines how long you'll live. And we want to address that because we know that just inherent in the medical system is, we've got systemic racism built into the system. And so because the majority of our population are either Latino or African American, we decide to treat the whole patient. And that means individually, each person uniquely treated based on their circumstances, based on their environment, based on their social needs, based on their finances, based on transportation, education. We had to figure out, what were we missing? Why are these patients not getting better? And so the FoodRx program is a program that I'm really proud of because it brings all of the specialists to the patient so that we can listen to the patient and ask them, what do you need from us? What are the barriers that prevent you from follow-up? What are the barriers that prevent you from prescription refill? What are the barriers to your taking your medication as prescribed? What are these reasons? Because no one wants to be sick, right? No one wants to intentionally feel bad. So there has to be some reason that perhaps is out of their control. And so this program offers nutrition support. So as I work as a clinical dietitian, malnutrition also comes into play. And we look at whether it's chronic disease, whether it's cancer. And I can tell you a story about cancer. Anyone here who knows anyone who's either lived through it or maybe ultimately succumbed, you know that ultimately it really takes a toll on the body. And I had a niece at the time who had developed breast cancer, had gone through treatment, and the breast cancer had gone into remission, but then it came back, and it had metastasized. And at some point, it was really clear that, you know, this was going to be really an uphill fight. Eventually, with treatment, it becomes very hard to keep food on your stomach. Your appetite goes way down, and your loved ones basically see you kind of wasting away in front of them. And it's scary. It's scary for the family to watch someone that they love. And it's scary for the children who, you know, watch their mom. And so my niece and her family had sought out a company that was providing what we call medical nutrition therapy. And as a dietitian, it's something that we render that allows us to sort of consider your overall nutrition needs as they relate to a medical condition and provide therapy for that particular condition. And in her case, it was really kind of simple. She just needed calories in, she needed nutrition, but you know, she also needed healthy fats. She needed to be able to have something available to eat at all times. And it just sort of, I just decided at one point, I'm just going to make soup. This is even before I knew she was receiving soup from an outside company. And I just started delivering it to her. And as a dietitian, I know, you know, let me make her some bone broth. Let's try to get some collagen in. Let's try to get some protein, amino acids. You know, amino acids, as you string them along, are really the building blocks for DNA or gene expression, right? So let me try to take everything that I know clinically about food so that it provides nourishment and support, right? So that's the great thing about food, is that not only is it yum, like Rebecca says, not only is it delicious and it's an experience, but it's also sustenance. And, you know, not only is it something that is inherent in our families, as Keulani said, there's a heritage to our food, and we have to respect that. And so as a dietitian, I can't just write one prescription for a meal, follow the Mediterranean diet, right? My people have never been to the Mediterranean. That is not where they're from, and that is not the food that they eat. So I have to be able to, you know, to a patient who is from West Africa, I have to be able to know that what those foods are, what those cereals are, what those grains are that are native to those countries, so that they will be able to enjoy their heritage foods, but at the same time, understanding that they have diabetes. And so we may need to reduce the amount of, let's say, moi moi, which is made from black-eyed peas, or fufu, which comes from mashed yams, and really start incorporating more of these, maybe something like bitter leaf soup that has the bitter leaf greens, onions, tomato, might even have spinach or kale, and then some of the native fish, right? Some of the seafood from that part of the world, jollof and those sorts of things. And if they're Caribbean, you know, being able to understand that they eat a lot of fried dough, they use a lot of palm oil. So how can we take these foods that are native and important and have a meaning to them, and still treat their chronic disease? So we spend a lot of time in our clinic doing just that, meeting that patient where they are, making sure that they can get to their appointments, making sure they have access, not just to their medications, but access to food. We provide food, we provide education, we provide transportation, we provide what our community health advocates do is, if a person needs to sign up for food stamps and they don't have a computer, we make sure that at the end of the FoodRx program, they have been connected to all of the social services and resources to which they are entitled, but that they also leave with the food knowledge that they can take back to their families, because over the course of this 6 months, everyone in the household is starting to eat in a new way, because it really does start with the babies. It starts with being able to provide good, solid, dense nutritional food to the families, meal in and meal out, and learning that there are more vegetables in this world besides broccoli and green beans. There's more. There's a whole universe of fresh fruits and vegetables. And I don't think we can end this conversation and talk about food heritage and food sovereignty without talking about the fact that, you know, you need land to grow food. And so these community agriculture, local farmers and getting a lot, maybe a building has been torn down, starting gardens, whether they're vertical or small community gardens, so that people see where their food comes from, and then they are able to decide, what do they want to grow to eat? What is of interest to them? What has meaning to them? So taking our food back a little bit and having some sovereignty over what we eat, where it comes from, and being able to decide, once they're educated, what's the optimal way for me to eat to best support my nutrition needs in this moment. And I can tell you that patients who go through the program ultimately find out that this is not 20 years ago where everyone said, you can't eat this and you can't eat that, and you only eat this and a little bit of that and stay away from this. And we've really migrated more towards, you can eat what you'd like. You just need to know you can eat a lot of this, you eat a little bit of that, and you can still be satisfied. So that's our program.
Angela, this is the big takeaway, I think, is it's often not what you can't have, it's what you can have.
Yes.
And then, of course, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? But I do think that what you're saying is that you're giving people this really broad education. And Keolani, it's the same that you have expressed too. Where is the food coming from? Look at things from from a different perspective, a larger perspective, that there's a lot that we can have that we just haven't been exposed to. And I just again, this is really important. I want to just ask one thing. What's one thing somebody can do? Like the teeniest little shift somebody can make in your mind?
Honestly, it is to just be a little bit more open-minded. And it's not anyone's fault, right? You can only know what you've experienced. But I see the biggest shift in patients and the most improvement when a patient says, I'm open to what you're saying. I may not even believe you, but I'm open to trying something different. And it's okay if it doesn't, if that's not the thing, right? We'll try something else, but I'm open to trying, because where I am is not working. Where I am is leaving me tired and sick and, medications. I'm open to trying something new, just to learn. And I think that's the biggest thing. Just be open.
Great. Wonderful. I want to bring somebody else into the room, Dr. Drew Ramsey, who I've known for quite some time. And Dr. Ramsey, you are going to have a lot to say about what you do, but you have forged an amazing area of nutrition in the world of psychiatry. One of you're just a trailblazer in this area, and how food and what we eat really affects how we feel on a daily basis. And I want to hear from you just about what kinds of foods can help with mood and depression and finding equilibriums, and the tactics of what specific foods people can immediately incorporate into their lives. And just to hear how you got into this, how you found this connection between literally what we eat and how it makes us feel, literally, on a daily basis.
I started listening to women like yourself, Kaulani and Angela, in addition to what all of the physicians were teaching me, quite honestly. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to get to speak with you and to be with such an esteemed group. Kaulani, thank you. Listening to you, I think for those of us who don't have clear food traditions is incredibly meaningful. It's like being in church, just thinking I hadn't really, for all of what I know, considered truly what you said, that the legacy of the human race resides within each of us, and every food choice we make says something about that and our commitment to that. That's such an inspiring way to think about it. So thank you. And thank you, Angela, for all the work you do. In nutritional psychiatry, I wanted to take the best of mental health. And the best of mental health means that each of us has our own journey when it comes to mental health. And if we don't honor that journey for my people or Angela's people or Kaulani's people involve a different menu. And that to really truly connect to ourselves and to have true mental health, to have the best we can be of ourselves, we have to have a deep connection to where we're from. And so much of that travels in our food. I also, like Kaulani gives me information. I always chewed up cashews because I knew they had iron when my wife was breastfeeding. Back in the day, she breastfeeded for a long, long time. And, it felt like everyone would always scold us but it just felt natural to me. And I never understood why. And I really appreciate you letting me know that something in my humanness understood that you chew it up and put it in the baby's mouth, and that's healthy. And that's how we got nuts in there early. Nutritional psychiatry, to Rebecca's question specifically, comes down to the notion that what we eat affects our mental health. It's been very clear in the data now with 5 recent randomized controlled trials, the most recent of in young teenage men, young boys, getting them to change their diet. In these trials, about 1/3 of people who are clinically depressed enter full remission. A lot of these studies recently have been in colleges and in our young adults, which again, an intervention that isn't, coming to see some guy like me who's going to put you on Zoloft or whatever, but instead getting encouragement. Hey, a lot of what you do every day, what you eat impacts your mental health and your brain health. And there is just a whole bunch of miracles up there waiting to happen. So let's give it the right fuel. That is a powerful message. It means that we can take control of our mental health every day. And I saw this happen with Rebecca Katz in the Center for Mind Body Medicine. I met Rebecca Katz in a hospital cafeteria and kitchen system, essentially, where there was an intervention, an idea back in Indiana, where I'm from, that we were going to have kind of like I don't know what you'd call it, the Woodstock of mental health. We're going to take all of these conservative Indiana medical professionals and get them shaking and dancing and eating lentils and quinoa and talking about their feelings. I graduated from medical school and I was like, this is not going to happen, people. It was like, it was very scary. And then it happened. And I saw Rebecca in there at the kitchen with Seth Grant, who's just a hero in the Midwest. That kitchen now serves medically tailored meals delivered, made of 90% of ingredients from locally grown Indiana farms to all 92 counties in Indiana. That's what Rebecca Katz did. She did it by inspiring people with what everyone here knows and is talking about. And so if you have ever questioned or find yourself wondering, I don't know, existentially about what we're all up to works, just think about Seth Grant, Eskenazi Hospital, and Rebecca Katz, and it happens. It happens quickly when people dedicate themselves to it. And I think that, to me, is nutritional psychiatry at its essence. Whereas Kaulani said that word connection, right? Your mental health and your brain health is made of connections. Your brain is billions, millions, trillions of connections. When I look into a patient's life, I see patients here all day long. I get to take nice breaks like this, but mostly I'm a clinician. When I see this rich life filled with connections and people making those connections, engaging, that's mental health. And so it's like this very, right from the structure of our brain to the function of our lives and to how we really enact our spirit is through our connections. And so the foods we can eat, to get to Rebecca's questions quickly, revolve around food categories. We're trying to move away from this notion, as we're hearing this theme of don't eat cholesterol or saturated fat. Hey, find those foods, find food that have been meaning to you and your peoples and your experience and your journey, and find them in these food categories. And they're all the food categories that Angela just mentioned. So they're leafy greens, bitter green soups, fundamental every day, filled with more nutrition and hydration and B vitamins and vitamin C. They're rainbow vegetables. They are seafood. Right? They are the traditional components of all traditional diets, whether you are in Hawaii or whether you are in Africa or whether you are in Indonesia. The core elements of a traditional diet are whole real foods, seafood, nuts, beans, seeds, and fermented foods. And if you just think about how much the world of fermented foods, the microbiome and mental health and inflammation have just blown up. It's literally, I talk about inflammation and microbiome and fermented foods with every single patient I meet, not because I'm out on the fringe, because I'm following the data on how food interventions can impact mental health and brain health. I have a little rhyme: seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. And I hope that all of you will simply appreciate that, the data is catching up with what we've known, that this onslaught and epidemic of health and mental health disorders has a hand in how we're living our lives. And what's empowering about that for all of us and all of our patients is that then we have a hand in the solution. And a lot of it, as I've said before, is at the end of our fork. We also need to be careful not all of it is at the end of the fork. And that part of post-traumatic growth is, in such a wonderful term as I understand it, being in that business. I was talking with a patient of mine. I can't tell you where she was, but let's just say it's one of the more powerful houses in the world. And that's where she works now. And I was talking with her as a victim of horrible trauma that I sat with her 5 years ago. And to see someone make that journey, someone have that post-traumatic growth, it's such a critical thing for us all to know is one of the most powerful things that all of us can do with our human spirit. So it's a real wonderful honor to be with you and to think about that and to think how my field of mental health needs to grow to better serve everyone, and that Rebecca Katz and Brain Food and Nutritional Psychiatry and the collaborations that we're seeing, I think they're part of this next generation of mental health that I hope we're all going to achieve together. So thank you. It's a real honor to be with you all.
Thank you, Drew. That was amazing. And Rebecca, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in here real quick for just one comment beforehand. The trauma, we speak to the trauma, and I don't think we can really, I know I can't really fully understand when I have a patient who is in pain 24/7, who doesn't get much sleep because of the pain, but for a lot of reasons in this country, regards to pain pill, as well as getting the appropriate care in a timely manner. And so when you are struggling with wounds that may be sort of a complication from hyperglycemia, maybe you've developed congestive heart failure as a result, and now you're dealing with a lot of edema. And so when your limbs and extremities are swollen beyond comprehension, and the skin has now thinned and broken, and your blood sugars are, elevated, you can't really imagine the trauma that this person lives in day in and day out. And I'm committed to helping this young man. This is a young man. Let's get wound care on board. Let's work on the diet, and let's work on getting your blood sugars under control. And if it's medication that we need in the beginning to sort of put this fire out, then let's deal with that as we work our way towards healing. But many people need healing, and part of the healing is going to come from food. But the trauma that they are experiencing every day is really the biggest part of their life. And so it's important that we start chipping away at this nutritional deficit that we have created, that our food system, the agricultural food system that is sort of, maybe we didn't know better. Maybe the USDA 50 years ago thought we were doing the right thing when we sort of made up all of these pyramids and came up with all of these ways of farming. But we do need to get back to healing ourselves through and with food, because people are really suffering.
Thank you, Drew. Do you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to point out, I think Angela, part of with some of what you're saying is the way that hope and our stance in healthcare, that we haven't focused as you do on saying essentially, what is not giving you any more hope in the system? Is it that the doctors say take these pills, but you can't fill them? Because that would give me no hope. Is it that you've been in pain and been traumatized and don't have a partner? Well, now you have a partner, and we are here to help you solve problems. And I think that's one of the major reasons, it's not that that you see people getting so much better in programs like yours, is that there's someone who's going to hang on to that process. Because when I'm sick, I feel betrayed by my body. When I'm sick, I want to act out more. I want to isolate. I want to be depressed. I want to make bad choices. I want to eat ice cream and drink soda and watch movies. Right. And so knowing that there's someone else who is going to hold hope for me and hold me accountable, that, yeah, you do want to do that.
Yeah.
But-
Depression. Yeah, depression is a big part. But to close that loop, I can tell you that every day patients come off of meds, patients increase their amount of fruit and vegetables they eat. The science is not wrong. The science says, when we research food and diabetes, the science says, eat more plants. Heart disease, eat less saturated fat, but eat more plants. And so we know it works. I see it work every day. Patients come off of all medication. Their blood sugar is managed through food. They even, although you cannot get rid of diabetes, but you can certainly bring your numbers down to a level where you are considered non-diabetic. And that can all be done through food. And it's not a myth. It happens every day. And it's just something that we have to put food first when we also talk about medicine.
I am wondering, Andy, if we should start taking some questions.
I think that's a great idea. I see there's one in there from Danielle and a related one from Elizabeth. We at Reimagine, we'd like folks to unmute if they want and ask their question directly. Danielle, if you're still with us, if you want to do that, feel free. If not, I'm happy to read it out loud. Okay. Danielle has a history of disordered eating and a complicated relationship with food. Last year, she was diagnosed with multiple autoimmune conditions. She also lives with PTSD, grief, and depression. She knows she needs to nourish her body well and engage in other wellness behaviors, but her mental health and fatigue make this really difficult, and would love to get advice from our panels. And I want to add to this, Elizabeth also mentioned that her depression and anxiety makes food prep and kitchen cleanup really hard. And do you folks have suggestions about where to begin when she's depleted with energy?
Who's going to start? I'll start, and then we'll go around. First of all, it's very overwhelming. I'm just going to talk from a technical perspective. It's really hard when you're not used to cooking, right? It's like a muscle that people look at cooking and they look at the whole meal, right? And that means the shopping, the prepping, the making of the food, and then the cleanup. But it's not that at all. It's one small portion at a time. It's cooking is just actually maybe for you, maybe assembling something, right? I think so. The first thing is that I advise people to do is have something, if it's possible, in your house, to have a plan. So when you go and you shop, that you have some essential ingredients, doesn't have to be a lot, in your house already. And then the next step would be maybe preparing them in advance, whether it's chopping some onions or lettuce or whatever it is that you're going to assemble. And then maybe then you're gonna cook that on a different day. It's I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not an all encompassing thing. I think it becomes overwhelming. So it's like taking everything and reducing it to its smallest job. And I'm going to tell you that cooking really can be more like assembling. Like if you had an egg in the house, right? And you had, you knew that the color is green right now that we're talking about with those leafy greens. And you had some olive oil. You could take those greens, saute them, and crack an egg and scramble it in with those greens. And you would have a little bit of nourishment in a bowl, right? Or maybe it's at the beginning, it's about all I can handle right now is maybe choosing to hydrate myself. Maybe that's my first step. Maybe because my body is composed of water, that I am going to do that. And maybe I'm going to put a lemon in it. I mean, I know this sounds kind of super granular. I guess what I'm trying to say is it can be overwhelming if you think of it all as this big thing, and perhaps breaking it down into parts is really helpful. And it does help to have somebody who can help you do that, especially when you're beginning. So, Drew, you have thoughts? We can go around.
Okay, sure. Danielle, first, I just want to say thank you, and how wonderful to be here in 2023 where you can just put that in a chat. And I just really appreciate that something's shifting. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, in the spirit of that. So I've had a very hard time with my mental health over the last couple of years, probably like the hardest I've had. And so what you say really speaks to me. And I think, so these are sort of both from my personal life of what I've done in terms of, because it does seem overwhelming. One thing I've tried to do is stop following catastrophic influencers. Like I've kept a couple around like Dave Asprey because he's such a good marketer. But the way that they constantly tell me that things like kale or dark chocolate or brown rice or beans are bad for me and going to drain all the minerals from my body, like especially when I'm feeling down, my brain has a little hard time with that. And I start to latch onto it as I'm depressed, and I start to kind of question everything and just go into one of those. So I try to really limit that content and focus on what I intuitively know is true, that real whole foods help me feel better. I accept limits, which I think is hard. You mentioned a lot of hard things. Anxiety and depression are two of the most disabling diseases depression is the most disabling disease in the world, period. It's not heart disease, it's not cancer. The most disabling disease in every community with everyone speaking is depression. Followed by that is probably alcohol use disorder. And so accepting the limitations of the conditions that we have, especially like autoimmune, a lot of times that's like, no this, no that, no gluten. And a lot of people have opinions. So I think focusing on what works for you and then accepting some of the limitations that I know when I'm depressed, I'm not going to be cooking my best meals or growing my best garden, but I'm going to do something. I think use resources. That's something when we're struggling with anxiety and depression, we don't do. If you got some extra money and can have some meals delivered, or you can do something that feels good, like have a potluck dinner. And so you only make one dish and everyone else takes home their dishes, but use the resources you have. I focus on low hanging fruit. So I sit a lot for a living. I'll see patients for, a lot. So for me, it's really important to have snacks and great drinks. And so it looks like I've got some oral fixation problem when you see me in session. I'm always like, driven. I've got my hop waters, I've got my kombuchas, I've got my herbal teas, and I'm like stocked up in there, and even if I'm not doing well, I'm stocked up in there because I know that I can just walk over and get something. It's a little treat for myself. So mine are nuts, fruit, fermented dairy, kombucha, and then no alcohol, which is just transformational. And then simple. You don't like dishes? Don't use dishes. Just eat it right out of the pan. I've done that, you know, and
Right.
and sometimes I feel like, oh, like, who are you, college boy? And it's like, no, I'm somebody who's going to eat this pan, and then I'm going to wash this pan, and I'm going to go back to being sad and anxious, you know? So those are some of my thoughts for you, of keeping it just really, like, sometimes for me, I'll cut open an avocado, and I'll pour olive oil on it, and I'll do pepper, and I'll mash it up, and I'll eat it. You know, no dish, like no prep, no nothing, right? Just a good avocado, and then a handful of pistachios and a kombucha, and I'm on my way. Also, I appreciate you mentioned having some in disordered eating. So I think that's very challenging, and a lot of the treatments for that are around not having values with food. And I think one way that I get around that is I just focus on the food that God made. It's all good. And so good luck with all of that. And thank you so much for your question.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Or do we want to take another question?
Can I just add, I have one thing that I don't think we mentioned, and Danielle, I hear you, and I don't know whether the disordered eating is, you know, I'm not sure what end of the spectrum it's on, you know, bulimia or anorexia, I don't know. But I think what's always helpful for me when I'm feeling stressed or anxious or overwhelmed is I get out into nature, go take a walk, and really use that time to feel rooted. You know, maybe you go out with, I don't know, maybe you go out with an apple, or maybe like Drew said, maybe you go out with a bag of cashews or something. But as you're walking, let yourself know, as long as you're in a safe space, like go someplace where you feel very safe, very protected, and just let yourself know that you are okay in that moment as you eat your apple, that you are okay, and that whatever may be going on with you, the grief or the PTSD, let yourself know that it's bigger than you, right? That you're not here to solve all things. We are all here interconnected with one another. And if you can just feel the connection between you and the ground that you're walking on, and knowing that you're okay, and that you don't have to be perfect, and that, you know, today is today and tomorrow is tomorrow. And, you know, there's an opportunity, God willing, to maybe make another step tomorrow. But just get out and take a walk. And, you know, this sounds cheesy, but like, look at the birds, and, you know, if you can walk around the lake, look at the water, and just look at the magnitude of it, and say, you know, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'll be better tomorrow. And if not, I'll try again. But try not to let it overwhelm you to the point where you're just frozen, where you can't do anything. You can't cook. You can't go out. You can't make a decision. Try to just move step by step by step, and just every step say, I'm okay. I'm okay right now.
Rebecca, there is another question here from Wanda. She says, I want to use my background in nutrition and culinary arts to help people in my community. I live in a rural food desert. Our food bank has seen over double the clients compared to years past. I am also able to work with the local domestic violence. I am also able to work with the local domestic violence center. What advice do all of you have?
Wow. I'm hoping that some other people can chime in here too. This is I'm going to go back again to the basics. Community is everything. Getting people to cook with each other is everything. I have worked in communities like this, and it is truly starting off with, again, this notion of where the community is, what they're going to be responsive to, that you're not going to necessarily change everybody's eating habits or the world, but you're just trying to get everybody connected to food. And usually that happens when you can procure food and have people put their hands on it and feel it and cook it and make it together in a group. This feeling of being isolated is just a horrible feeling. I mean, the idea that there are food deserts, that are people that cannot have access to food and that are isolated from their community is and kind of trapped is just the antithesis of being nourished. So it is a collaboration. It is even getting the simplest foods, but really getting people together and teaching small things, having people cook a meal together in its simplest form, and then have people have the ability to take some of that food home to their family that they've already cooked together. I worked in a program where I trained doctors, a small group of community doctors that were working in this type of environment, that they were dealing with patients that were in this kind of food desert that they, and they had to relearn and rethink about their connections with food, and they learned it by cooking together and then helping their patients in the smallest, stay in that smallest, easiest thing to do. So it's a lot of it also is getting funding to be able to do that and collaborating with the right partners. And I would be happy to talk with you further. Maybe we can chat offline and or through email or whatever, and maybe I can help connect you depending on where you are. But yes, this is like the best thing we can do as culinary educators, is just bring this community together, bring communities together through food in the simplest ways.
Rebecca, I feel Ke'ulani might have some.
Yes, I was just going to say.
Thanks for asking. Same thing. We live the area that I live in, that some of the same things we're up against. And we try and also reach out to other providers. So people love food demos. They love cooking together. But do you have someone else that can, we bring in music, we bring in Zumba, we bring in poi pounding, cultural events. So we try to provide events for our community where they can come together, but it doesn't solely rest on us. Like, we'll do some of the food part, but then we have all kind of other things that the community comes together for. And like I said, we always try and include some type of cultural event, cultural food, something for the kids. So we try to do that on a well, before COVID, we would do it on a regular basis. The other thing that we do, and again, this goes to funding, but we would have cultural dinners or cultural get-togethers, and not for a large amount of people, but 30 or 40 people. And we would have topics that were kind of controversial. So, even bringing together resources for domestic abuse, but bringing together people, having them have a meal and conversation that was joyful and fun and safe, and then having some of the harder conversations have been really helpful for us. And so I would reach out to other providers in their area and see if, maybe they have some of the same interests you do, to be able to provide some of these things for your community.
Well,
Caroline,
Andy-
I had a quick question related that for a lot of us in food deserts, and especially in rural America, the idea of a traditional diet is a little tough because it's not sure what we're getting to. For you and your work, it's incredibly deep and meaningful, but, that's getting culture like away from McDonald's. But a lot of us come from a culture where, the cultural food is McDonald's. And it related to Wanda's question, to show up at some places, a clinic with a big plate of healthy Mediterranean diet food, sometimes that really doesn't feel like a gift to people. It doesn't feel filling, right? Especially when they're expecting, traditional American, what do we deliver to, hospital residents and doctors? Big boxes of pizza and donuts. And so that feels like, that's like tasty food. That's what you do. But, and it's almost, I wouldn't say we're punishing them with healthy food, but I'm just wondering, when there isn't a traditional culture to get to other than kind of like whole food, whether there's some things that come to your mind that are effective in terms of connecting people to kind of the meaning and spirit of the healthier food when we're expecting pizza.
Can I just first say that one of my big things is that in medical school, and I don't know how it is across the rest of the country, but in Hawaii, I know that to go to medical school and graduate from medical school, a doctor does not even have to take a nutrition class. Like, that's not required. And so we're expecting doctors to give advice on food for which they've never been trained. And then when it comes to like public health and community and all of that type of food, it's very hard. So serving pizza is yes, that's what they do, because they want to, anyway, so getting to your question, I think that all of us have culture, like wherever you're from. And that's what we tell people to do, is to look back to your grandparents, to your great grandparents. What were they eating? What are those foods? And it seems like, well, maybe we're not eating it at that time. When I first went to KKV as a clinic, we gave our employees $50. And on a Friday, if you wanted to cook a food from your culture and just give everybody a taste, you could. And then you could, we had slideshows, we had people singing, we had people bringing things from their culture. And, Greece, Panama, Samoa, Philippines, Micronesia, because we wanted to create a culture of being really proud of who you were, where you came from, and just sharing. So, but I also have a grandson that's living in Iowa, and I can understand that, because when I went to visit out there, I saw no one that worked like me. I mean, that looked like me, right? So there's bringing my kalo and bringing my, fish and bringing all of that stuff, that wouldn't have worked. But I would just say, what is your area known for that's healthy? Like, what can you provide from where you are? Are there cultural aspects to whoever is in your program that they want to share? Like, people want to learn. I find that people want to learn, and they want to try foods, and they want to learn about other cultures. They want to find connections to food. It's really hard to just find connections to pizza or fried chicken and chili. At home, I'm often saying that we provide all these great programs for our kids and our family, but we're feeding them chicken and hot dogs and chili and chips. And we're missing a really good opportunity to provide not just healthy foods, but food that's meaningful. So for us, it's culture. So I would say to you, if it's not culture, then what foods are meaningful to the community that you're in? And that sometimes will take a little research. It'll take time reaching out. I once heard really fast just about a program in New York where they were going to the grandmothers in New York and finding out what their cultural backgrounds were and getting them to cook the foods for the community. I mean, in these cooking classes, and people loved it because I think they really like that. And I totally agree with what Angela said about, our land is so important, and we've been disconnected, and we don't have places to grow. And so even in programs, if you can find that relationship to the land and what's growing around where you are, and that's healthy, then make those connections and see. I mean, that's what comes to my mind.
Rebecca, Drew, Angela, Kai'u, I am so sorry, but I have bad news. We have to stop because this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you in the audience for your questions. Thank you for being here. I'm putting in the chat now a link to part 2 of this series, Food is Medicine. Please join us next week, same place, same time. Actually, not same place, it's a different Zoom link. So register for this. You'll get the Zoom link. You'll get a recording of this, some helpful resources from Rebecca Katz, Thank you, everybody. Mahalo, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Kulani.
Hello,
Thank you.
thank you. It's a pleasure being on the panel with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, same. Have a great week, everyone.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.